Hello BookTube, I'm Peg and welcome to my channel. Well, I imagine anybody watching this knows who Steve Donahue is. I've been seeing some tags lately on with questions like, who's your favorite booktuber? What channel would you recommend to somebody who just found BookTube? And by far, the majority of answers are always Steve Donahue. I think he's probably the one many of us come upon when we first start looking at BookTube. And I think we owe him a vast amount of literary knowledge from seeing all the new books and his, he calls them rants on the books and talking about them. And I've just been on BookTube myself for several months, so I wasn't aware that he puts out these fantastic best of the year lists. I remember he talked a little bit about it, but I had no idea what they involved. I just came upon them a couple days ago in his Open Letters blog. Now I've linked this at the bottom, so any of the books I talk about or any of the lists you can see. He's up to like 12 different categories now, I believe, with 10 books in each of his favorites or what he considers the best of the year. And I am having a great time going through them and reading them and thinking about them. Now, I've admitted before I'm a real library rat, and I have a wonderful library with like 16 different branches that I go to, and I go real often. And I just found out that the limit is 100 books. So I've gone through his lists. I just went up this morning and put a lot of them in for requests from his list and or on hold. So I'll be coming in again with going over some of the ones in Steve's lists. You know, I certainly won't be able to read them all, but I have since it's free from the library, I really like to check out things and check out the books, like read a little bit about them, maybe read a little of them, reviews, etc. To me, that's a lot of fun, and who knows, maybe someday I'll decide to review the books. So this is probably what I'll be doing with most of these that I come upon that are on his list. But as I said, I've linked at the bottom his blog, which you can go through, and it shows all the different categories. He just added one today called Nature and Science, so he must be putting them up almost every day, new ones. So far, he has things like reprints, guilty pleasures, translations, kids and YA, romance, nature and science. The ones I'm going to be concentrating on are what he has so far is fiction debuts, mystery, science fiction and fantasy, and historical fiction. Those are my favorites, and I've put a lot from each list, as I said, on hold or already gotten from the library that I'll be going over with you. So I'll just talk about a few today to give you a little taste of what's out there. Now, he's never recommended a book that I didn't like, I have to admit. So I'm quite anxious to see these and maybe try several of them. Incidentally, I do have a very literary necklace on today. This is Shakespeare in the style of Andy Warhol. Okay. So first I have a book to show from Steve's best science fiction list. And on this he has the book Born by Jeff Vandermeer. Now, Jeff Vandermeer wrote a very famous and well-received trilogy called the Southern Reach Trilogy, which I really liked. And Steve said he wasn't a real big fan of that, but he did really like this. So I'm sure to like this. Evidently, it's about the future dystopian world where people are scavenge around for things, and they come upon this living kind of big blob or mass. I haven't read it yet, but it's a sentient being and I guess talks. I really don't know much about it, but I'm looking forward to reading it. And Steve said that his comment was that one of the best parts for him was the way it showed the friendship, I guess, between the human and non-human blob or whatever. So I'm very curious about this one. Next is one from his best mysteries list called Prussian Blue. Now, I have been wanting to read this for some time. This is part of a series, though you don't have to read all the series. I've read most of it. It started in the early 1990s, where this author wrote about a man called Bernie Gunther, who lived in Germany. He was an ex-policeman in pre-war Germany, in Berlin there, and I've read the first, there's a trilogy that he started out with, or they call it a trilogy now, called the Berlin Noir trilogy, and in it introduces you to Bernie Gunther and shows how a good person tries to make decisions and do things and stay alive in Nazi Germany. So I really got a feel for the guy, and now he's gone on and he's written, I don't know how many in the series, but he goes forward in time. Now, the one I read just before this, it was called The Other Side of Silence, took place in 1956 on the French Riviera, where our guy Bernie Gunther is kind of working as kind of an odd job man. Things haven't gone too well for him, and he runs into Somerset Maugham, the actual real life author, and does a little job for him. Maugham is being blackmailed for some homosexual activities and pictures, which back then I guess it was blackmail material. And Bernie helps him out and runs into other escapades on the way. So anyway, I'm not sure what this is about, but I know it's been rated very good. I almost read it for the tome topple because it's definitely a tome, but I'm glad I waited because I'm anxious to read it. I might just read this on this weekend. It looks very good. Okay. Last from Steve's list, I have from his new translations list, and it's a new translation of a sequel to The Three Musketeers by Dumas, and it's called The Red Sphinx. Isn't that a beautiful cover? Now, I couldn't find this even to get on hold at my library, so I'm thinking I might just put this on my own Christmas list because it really looks interesting. Evidently, this sequel has never been translated before, but there was another sequel that Dumas wrote in the 1840s, right after he wrote The Three Musketeers, called 20 Years Later, and it did deal with 20 years later. But then at the end of his career, he wrote this other sequel, which takes place right after The Three Musketeers ends. So it's all been put together, I guess, in one story, and they've added another story he wrote about the ending of the book called The Dove. So somehow this has all been put together in this translation. So I'm really anxious to read it. It's been many years since I read The Three Musketeers, so I probably need to reread it first. So anyway, well, as I said, I've put the link to all Steve's best of the year lists down below. So read it, enjoy yourself. I'll be back. I'm finding as many of them as I can, probably not to read, but at least to look over and talk about. So thanks for the great list, Steve, and keep reading. Bye.